So currently, we again talk about our sustainable approach. We use an upcycled shipping container. The CO2 footprint associated to the manufacturing of this was used for transportation. We now take it into the upcycle, and then we will reuse the structure and turn it into rentable assets and or sellable assets, these rectangular cubes, and stack them in different environmental ways. Yeah, you know, right here, when you start talking about the comparison, say, to our model versus classic, we really looked at it on how we can really impact labor associated to the amount of people and the impact just in the environment, just to fly people and to do installations in time. We also talk about, since it's a single use or a short-term use, how do we not throw these items away and how do we repurpose and reuse? So the environmental impact associated to landfill, in addition to the CO2 impact. So the way in which we build and we use on current, we took it from a totally different perspective and really significantly reduced forklift requirements in the carbon footprint just to build modular structures. And we'll go into that a little further. So an example of what we do is we have the container that you see there in the design, and then we build it into an asset. We do have an impact of CO2 on the initial build, but then it goes into our inventory and we do not throw away anything. We reuse and repurpose the system. And so you could see an example of Audi on the left in the blue, and then it's also Visit Anaheim in California. It's the same asset. We just now are adding accoutrement, different paint. They may want a flooring change. We will keep the floor all intact. And so a lot of the times I can also kind of convince the client to, number one, save money. Number two, save the environment by just reusing the floor. It's always in pristine condition for the most part. And so that's an option for the client. So the nice thing, again, is we don't throw any of these items out. I will reuse a bar and it just goes into our asset. The foliage is the same. These are done with magnets and they go on real fast. So we reuse the system over and over again, and we have a whole fleet of assets. When we start talking about CO2 impact, you can see the or you can envision what it takes for us to do a move. So to build that 2-story structure, like I showed you, that is one truck. In 15 minutes, I take the ground floor and I place it in place. And another 15 minutes off the identical truck, I take the 2nd story. And in 45 minutes, I then do the stair. I've got approximately total of 12 forklift moves from the time it leaves our operation on site, gets brought, disassembled, and then brought back. I've got like 12 forklift moves. The system also acts as a warehouse. So the interior is carrying all the furniture and all that. So all those additional forklift moves are non-existent. Where if you were to do the same, you probably have 30 plus pallets and all those moves that you can think of, from, warehouse, trucks to site, back a house, bring it back, load it back onto a truck, bring it back to the warehouse and all that. So we reduce emissions just through this thought process by about 93% in the carbon, the CO2, metric tons. We can have a measurement based on forklift moves and our metric tons of 72 versus 1,080. And that's just one booth. And the thought process on how the conservation could happen if there was a different thought process in how we operate. And then again, these assets, right? So these are just examples of what I'm referring to in these models that we built over the years, and you can stack them any which way. I've got 20-foot shipping containers. I have 40-foot shipping containers, and then we can manipulate the systems. I can turn them upright. I have 10-foot systems. I can make AV towers, all that. And again, take the reduction of movements and reduce it. So we go about it through, a cradle to cradle and an environmental container system to keep it all in the economic loop and the repurpose recycle thought process. So the concept again is to not throw anything away and then have the least amount of CO2 impact. Some versatility and examples of some of our, kind of simplistic container builds, just to show how we can take these assets and use them in different showcases, indoors, outdoors. The bottom right's indoor. Avocados in Mexico has been a client of ours since 2018. And we've done multiple systems for them, of which they use the identical asset, and then we'll add on. Sometimes I'll add a second story to the system at events, and so we just take these assets and again, repurpose, reuse them. To reiterate about the installation, so we're at this particular project is at Quail, and everyone's building around us, and they've got 15, 20 people. Well, I have a total of 4. We were able to drive the container, and in this particular case, because they don't want forklifts on grass, we used a crane. But within a few hours, I have a 2 40-foot container side by side. So I'm 16 feet deep by 40 feet long. And then I also crane in the decks that the cars are sitting on, which are all stacked. And so within, 2.5 hours, the structure's in place with our 5 people. Meanwhile, people had been there for days prior. They're still building. We are now adding the SEG on there or what have you and making it nice and pretty. So reducing the labor, which also reduces obviously the impact of them travel, and then reducing the CO2 impact that they have with all the forklifts. And this is just kind of an example of some of how people are building. You can see all the different people. And then here we come in 20 minutes, that one's in. Another 20 minutes, I've got my second piece in, and then we just crane in the balance to a beautiful activation. So that one's, we don't use cranes a lot, but we do have that as an option. In the commercial construction world, we do use them more. To give you an idea of versatility and what we do, again, these are kind of like Legos. So this is an example of a white model, but we actually use this at Formula One right in front of the sphere for the magenta T-Mobile activation. We had a Diplo DJ on the top. We were on turn 4 and 5. So high impact, high visibility. Branding on the sphere is identical to the branding on ours with T-Mobile back and forth. So they value what we offered as a great, beautiful asset that they can kind of make sure their brand looks good. This was with Mattel on the center here. And again, it's just a bunch of our 20-foot assets that we're stacking one in front of the other. The nice thing about our decks, they're modular and they stack on top of the container. The handrails come off and they can travel with the system. So I can be as efficient as possible with movements of trucking. And then we go into, kind of more simplistic things with, 40-foot emulation, big bars, second story, what we call shade tainers and such. But these are, again, eco-friendly impacts that we can work with. The brands that trusted us, we predominantly work with, agencies, production houses, and then these are the brands that they currently usually bring to the table. And we've been trusted to make sure that we get all of their branded messaging and all that intact. Some of these companies have a sustainability approach and or request. The other thing that's beautiful about ours is even if they don't, they are operating in the most sustainable way. Our structure, based on it being a modular system, where everyone thinks on the individual, well, how can I reduce my LED with LED lighting? Or how can I do a compost waste? Or how can I do a movement associated to, an individual move? Where we come up at an approach with a whole system, the whole cube, and it's already incorporated. So the most impacted issue to trade shows and events is how the structure is built and the amount of labor and the amount of things that are thrown away. We've addressed that with our big modulated systems that we all incorporate a sustainable practice of operating just on the interior intricacy of detail, but it's the main asset that really has the biggest impact. And we feel we've addressed it the best possible way in events. So that is the end of the presentation based on sustainability and